Hi everybody. In this video I'd like to show you how to set things up so that Amazon Web Services S3 can be used as storage in your Omeka repository. This allows for us to use cloud storage as opposed to storing our images on a file server that we build ourselves or on the Omeka server itself. This really frees up more space. And being a service that you kind of pay for what you use, S3 works quite well and is relatively cheap. So the first thing I want to do is log into the S3 service, and from the console page I'm going to go to Services, and you'll find Storage S3 under there. And at the moment I don't have a bucket created for this, so that's the first step that I want to take, and I'm going to click on Create Bucket. And here we need to enter a DNS compliant bucket name. So essentially that means if you can't use a character like a space in your URL bar, you're not going to be able to use it in your DNS compliant bucket name. So what I'm just going to do is call this Omeka repo test. And I'm in Oregon, so you're going to want to choose whatever region is that you're in. So I'm in Oregon, and I will click Next. And here I don't need to worry about any of this stuff for what I intend to do, so I'm going to click Next. And we can set some permissions here. I am the owner of this, so naturally I'm going to get read and write permissions. For now, we're not really going to worry about anything here. I'm actually going to come back to this once we get the account set up, simply because there are some extra steps we need to take anyhow. So I'm going to click Next. And we're just reviewing what we've done, and I'm going to now click Create Bucket. And so here we have our Omeka repo tests bucket. So this is the name of the spot where all of the images and other digital files I want to store will be. So the next thing I want to do is provide some permissions, and we'll do that by clicking on the bucket. And as we can see right now, the bucket is empty. I don't have anything there. But what I want to do is create permissions. So I'll click on the Permissions tab. And from here, we can click on, we don't need to worry about any of this stuff. We're going to set things up in the bucket policy. And so here we need to add in a little snippet of code so that our users, our Omeka users, can view the images that we're putting into the system. And the best way to go about this is if we go to Documentation, and if we go to Bucket Policy Examples, here we have a list of different topics. What I would like to do is grant read-only permissions to an anonymous user. So I'm going to click on this. And essentially what this is doing is allowing for people who are visiting your Omeka site to actually view the images that we're storing in S3. So I'm going to copy this snippet of code, and I'm going to go back to my bucket policy, and I will paste what we have there. And you'll see that under example bucket we need to change things. So we have named, well, I have named my buckets Omeka repo test. So whatever you named your bucket will go into this spot here. So now we want to click Save. So the next thing we need to do is go into the Identity and Access Management module. We can do that by going to Services, and under Security, Identity, and Compliance, you'll see the IAM link. I'm going to click on that. And this brings us to a page where we can create a user that will allow for Omeka and S3 to communicate with one another. So I'm going to go to Users, and I'm going to add a new user, and I will call this person Test User. And then we need to select the AWS access type. So we want programmatic access, which is going to give us an access key ID and a secret access key that we'll be able to use in our Omeka config files to allow the two systems to communicate. So I'm going to click that and move on to permissions. And so there are a few options we have here. What we want is attach existing policies directly. So I'll click on that. And there are 313 different things to choose from. We're only interested in S3. So I'm going to search that out in the policy type and filter that out. And what we're going to need is something that provides full access to all buckets via the AWS Management Console. So I'm going to click on that permission and next. And we're reviewing. Everything looks good, so we create user. And now we have our test user. So what we want to do is click on that user. Oops. Actually, we want to close this, and we want to click on Test User and Security Credentials. And we want to create an access key. So we're going to click on that. And so we have the two keys here now that we've created it. So we can show the secret access key, and this is not something you want to share with people. This is just a test environment, so I'm not going to worry about it. But I'm going to copy this, and I have Notepad opened up, and I just want to paste that there. That's my security key. And I am also going to copy my access key. We are going to need these. When we go into the config file for Omeka. So I have those stored away, and I can click close. And at this point, we should be good. So we can go into our Omeka server, and I already have that opened up. We want to go to var www HTML application config. So we want to go to this directory. We will list the contents. And what we're looking for is the config ini file. So we need to go in there and edit that. So using your favorite text editor, sudo nano config ini. And we need to scroll through until we find this section here. So under the sample S3 cloud storage configuration, what we need to do is uncomment some of these lines. So this line needs to be uncommented. This line needs to be uncommented. And we need to put in our access ID, so I'm going to call up my file here. So the shorter one is the access ID, and I'm just going to copy that and then right click here to paste it. And here we have the security key. This is the one that we shouldn't be sharing with anybody. Copy and paste. And we also want to uncomment this line. And in fact, we really want to uncomment all of these lines that start with storage, so we'll just do that now. And I will say that this one I initially thought was optional, so it's probably a good idea just to uncomment it. I was running into a lot of errors, a lot of timeout errors before uncommenting that. So I would recommend uncommenting all of this. So the next thing we need to do is put in our bucket name, and mine was called Omeka Repo Test. We don't have to change anything under the expiration. The endpoint, however, we do need to make some changes. So what I'm going to do is just open up a tab here, and I am going to look for AWS Region Endpoints. So when I do a Google search for that, I'm going to get a hit for the AWS Regions and Endpoints. This is the spot that will tell you what region you should be using, what information you should be putting in. So I'm looking for S3. So further down the page, you could just do a Control F and Amazon S3, and that should bring you here pretty quick. I'm going to click on this link. And here we get a list of endpoints. So depending on what region is closest to you determines what you would pick as your endpoint. I'm in Oregon. I'm going to copy this endpoint here. Copy. Close that. And we want to paste that endpoint here, so I'll right click. Another important thing is to remember to put in HTTPS or HTTP. Both of them will work. If you don't put that in, you're going to get some errors, so be sure to get that in there. Okay, now we can, I think we're good. We don't need to add anything else, so we can Control X and yes to save. And so now we should have Omeka and S3 communicating with one another. And I'm going to test this by going to my Omeka site. And so this is a test server, so I'm just going to put in the IP address. Okay, so initially I had a image up here, and now that I've made it so that S3 and Omeka are communicating with one another, that image is gone because it's no longer being pointed to the spot it was saved at. So we want to test things out. We'll need to go into the admin module. Okay, so we are in the admin module. I'm going to go to items, and I have a test here that I'm going to edit. And I will go into files, and so the image that was initially here with that was pointing to the files directory on my Omeka server is no longer being pointed to. So I'm going to delete this image. save changes. And I'm going to go back into items, edit again. I'm going to go to files. I will choose a file and save changes. And there we have it. So our image is now linked to the S3 bucket. And just to kind of test things a little further, I'm going to log out and go back to my Omeka page. And if I go to Browse Items, we see that we have the picture there. And if I click on it one last time, you'll see that indeed we are in the S3 Omeka repo tests bucket. So that's all there is to it. If you're doing this with an Omeka installation that has already been up and already has a lot of images, I would recommend building a test server and just kind of playing around to figure out how to get the images from from your Omeka server onto the S3 server. My understanding is essentially all you need to do is just move the files from your S3 or from your Omeka server to your S3 server, and so you would probably have to use an FTP client or something like that to do it. But let's see, if we just go to if we go to cd var/www/html, and we list the files there. So you'll see the files is where they're traditionally stored. The digital objects are stored. So if we go into files, you'll see that we have a list of directories for where images are stored. If I go into full size, well, if we go into any one of these, we'll find some of the old. We'll find some of the old images. So here we have listed the old images, and what we need to do is just go to our S3 bucket and upload all of these images using an FTP server. So you'll see that if we go back to S3 and we go to the dashboard, services, S3. So when we go back to our bucket, you'll see that we have the same file structure as what we have in our initial Omeka server. So they're the same thing. It's just now everything is stored here in S3 as opposed to the Omeka server that I've built. So it's a pretty easy process. I hope it goes as smoothly for you as it had for me. And I thank you for watching.